Hi, it's the Lady Miss Vagina Jenkins, and it is time for queer astrology. Welcome back to my little section of the YouTube sphere where I talk about astrology from a queer, decolonial, neurodivergent lens. Just by way of check-in, my God, the December doldrums are hitting and it ain't even December yet. Yeah, I am running up against a couple of like real world factors that are making it difficult for me to keep my commitment to making weekly YouTube videos, and I did want to at least just acknowledge it. I am hoping that I keep to my weekly schedule. But yeah, the seasonal affective disorder is kicking my ass. The real world reality of the fact that we are in a recession and food insecurity is like also kicking my ass. And also both of those things are making it really difficult to think of new ideas. And so yeah, that's why I wanted to do this check-in, is because like real talk, I need a favor from you. If you have any ideas for YouTube videos in the future, please drop them in the comments below. In terms of past ideas that people suggested that I made videos for, people were asking about the different applications for astrology beyond like just your natal chart. And so I did a video about that. There's also an idea to, someone suggested, there's the homie Willow, in fact, had suggested doing a video about like, what is my approach to astrology? And I did that early on. And otherwise, and someone else suggested breaking down like the differences between like sidereal, Vedic, tropical, Western, all the different sorts of schools of thought around astrology. Did a video about that. I'm definitely down to like do these topics again, revisit them or whatever. But yeah, new ideas would also be helpful. No idea is too big, because I could break it down into like teenier sections of videos. No idea is too small, because you know how I be talking. I get to talking and can't shut up. So yeah, no idea is too big, too small, or too personal, because like maybe you have a specific question about your chart that I could like flip into a more general video that applies to a wider range of people. So yeah, any ideas would be super helpful. In this week's video, I wanted to take a more personal tack and talk about my journey from astrology enthusiast to professional astrologer. Professional is such a loaded word, by the way, for me anyway. When we think about like white supremacy culture and how one of the major tenets of white supremacy culture is professionalism, and that there's a proper way to do things. My God, what a limiting belief system. Anyway, so yeah, I wanted to talk about how that all sort of played out, and maybe it would inspire you to understand your own astrological journey through a different lens. So yeah, let's get into it. So I like to say that I made my first astrology chart in 1995. I know that because I'm an old, and I went to college for the first year in 1995, and I made my first astrology chart for a good friend of mine who was a Sagittarius. So yeah, that was the first time that I made an astrology chart for someone. And mind you, this is back in the day before there are widely available apps. I don't even think I had a cell phone at the time. Yeah, I'm so old. But yeah, there were not widely available apps, or maybe there were websites, but I was not aware of them. And so it was very much me, their birth date and birthplace, and all of the astrology resources in terms of like books that I could gather from my university library. I was making astrology charts for people as gifts, so like really, really close friends. No one ever knew their birth time. So yeah, that is how I just expressed my interest and curiosity in astrology from like 95 to 2000-ish. As it pertained to like my own personal astrology, yeah, I made my own chart as well, but I didn't understand what all of those placements meant, and I certainly didn't know how they were aspecting each other. And so I pretty much was like 90% of the astrology sort of enthusiast community. I knew about my sun sign, and I knew what newspaper astrology columns had to say about my sun sign, and that was pretty much the extent of it for the longest time. And yeah, I would definitely engage in like the pop astrology. Oh, such and such celebrity is a Scorpio. We know what that means. You know, or such and such person is acting funny. What's your sign? Oh, that's why I knew I didn't mess with you, because you're a such and such sun sign. Like that even makes any difference to anything when we take into account that there's like a whole chart behind it. But yeah, definitely is centered on like sun sign astrology, and that's where I left it for the longest time, like 20 plus years. And then I feel like things started to shift when I found I was an atheist or agnostic for the longest time as well. And I guess maybe around 2013, 14, basically when I moved to the Bay Area, I started to think about my spirituality, specifically because I had always lived in the Southeast, and my experience as a Black person in the Southeast is that you are so immersed in hoodoo culture, but you don't understand being in a thing when you're surrounded by it. It's when you remove yourself from it that you're like, oh, I was a fish breathing water that entire time, and now that I'm in the air, my God, things are different, you know? And so yeah, moving out of the Southeast to the West Coast, threw into contrast for me some of the hoodoo-centered spirituality and connecting with my ancestors specifically, that I was immersed in but didn't realize it. And so trying to get that back is how I started my spiritual journey. And so yeah, for the longest time I was more hoodoo-centered than astrologically centered. And I feel like the two converged when I started doing my own conjure or root work, and I was trying to figure out the timing of it all. That's when I started following the moon. The moon was the first thing that, I don't know, guided me into the idea of like deepening my astrology knowledge. Yes, it started with understanding the cycle and the opposition between the full moon and the new moon. But also I want to just understand like how people's temperaments, how moods might change when the moon was in different astrological signs. I also wanted to understand how people's temperament changes, the environment changes, how I felt differently as the moon waxed, grew, and waned, shrank. And I was a person, this is during that time, when I started revisiting my chart and thinking about, oh, what was going on with the moon when I was born? And so, yeah, I was born during a waxing gibbous moon, a moon that was growing and gibbous in that it was about 3/4 of the way to being full. And yeah, I have my own theories about like what that means in the world. I think that when the moon is waxing, it can sometimes give us a sense of like kind of Jupiterian vibes, like expansiveness. And then when the moon is shrinking, the opposite sort of thing. And I think that there's something that happens on the quarter moons when the moon is half dark, half light, that sort of gives a sort of tension to the emotional landscape. The sort of thing that they say about Pisces, how there's one fish swimming up and one fish swimming down. I think that's the vibe of the quarter moons on both sides. Anyway, so yeah, definitely started following the moon, full and new moon. I was doing that for like maybe a year or so. Then I started getting into, oh, well, let's follow the moon signs. And then I wanted to see my moon in my chart, which made me curious about how other people's moons looked in their charts. And yeah, I think it was moon sign astrology that really, really deepened my interest, or maybe renewed my interest in astrology again. And then, yeah, that went on for 4 or 5 years or so. And then in 2018, I started revisiting my chart because I was trying to make sense of a super toxic workplace. And I just was trying to understand. It's so funny. I am a person who, I'm autistic. And so a lot of times I think about, oh my God, there's a standard for normal and I'm not fitting into it. And so what's wrong with me? Internalized ableism, be loud in that way sometimes. I'm not necessarily proud of it, but that's how it shakes down sometimes. And so I was often thinking in terms of that toxic workplace environment, what is going on with me that makes it so I am not surviving this toxic workplace? And I hate that, but I love it that it did at least get me to a renewed interest, or a deeper interest in my own chart. And yeah, I was definitely looking at, okay, what's going on in my second house, the way that I earn money? What's going on in my 10th house, my public reputation? What is going on in terms of the ways in which I work in groups, my 11th house? And so, yeah, that's the place, I guess what I'm describing is that's the place where I started to understand that houses were important. And then I feel like that was like 2018, 19, 2019, 20 is when I started to think about, oh, you know what? There's a whole body of research that exists. And I have long been a person that can't access written books anymore. I used to be hyperlexic as a child and in my college years, and after college the trauma of that sort of made books sort of off the table for me. But then I remembered, oh, there's an entire body of research of people that are doing work around astrology on social media. So I started intentionally following social media accounts devoted to astrology. And discernment. I made that video last week where I was talking about like red flags to look out for with astrologers, because I had to go through that process. I started following all of the more popular accounts, and then realizing why they were popular, because of course they're popular because they're in alignment with dominant paradigms of capitalism and white supremacy and weird gender binaries and racism, and so it was like that process of discernment. That's kind of what I was describing in last week's video. But yeah, getting to a place where I felt in community with people helped even deepen my astrology enthusiasm even more. And so, yeah, I feel like 19 and 20 is when I really started actively learning astrology for the purposes of becoming a professional astrologer. And so, yeah, I started doing readings for people around that same time because I wanted to practice the things that I was learning. And I wouldn't do them like, paid readings. I would do them just for my friends. And you know what? Shout out to the homies that received readings in like 2019, 2020. Thank you for being a place for me to learn and practice. I'm not going to put down myself for being a beginner and learning things. I am instead going to just like offer up my gratitude and say thank you for allowing me a place to learn and practice. Yeah. So that was like 19, 20, 21. And then at the tail end of 2021 is when I gave my first professional reading. And by professional, I mean I was paid for my services. yeah, this person that I used to know from living in Atlanta in the Southeast reached out, or maybe I reached out to them. I was like, hey, I've been practicing this thing. I want to make it a professional thing. And they were like, yeah, actually people practice their divination practices on me all of the time. And so it was an opportunity to get paid for practicing and also to reconnect with them. And yeah, so that was a really cool thing that they were able to do for me. And then, yeah, from then I started doing professional readings. And my attitude towards doing professional readings at that time as a beginner, how I got over the, what do you call it? Imposter syndrome about it all, is a couple of different things. One, remembering to have the confidence of a mediocre white man. I can do anything, you know? That's like my guiding principle in life, or one of my guiding principles. And two, I had gotten a professional reading that I paid, for me, what was a lot of money for. And I don't know how to say this diplomatically, but I knew more than them. I knew more than the person that I was paying to read my chart. For example, I was like, oh, why did you choose Placidus over whole sign? And they were like, what? And I was like, oh, you know the different house systems? Oh no, I didn't know the different house systems. Okay, babe. Okay. And then I was asking questions like, oh, what do you think about this particular aspect, you know, between like this planet and that? Oh, I don't read aspects yet. And I was like, wow, huh. And, you know, again, my friends definitely supported me through that. I definitely remember talking to someone about that experience, and they were like, you know, the deal is everybody has a unique wisdom to share, a unique perspective and wisdom to share. And so people might just be excited to hear your perspective. You don't necessarily have to 100% know everything, but showing up with your unique wisdom and saying the things that you can share and see and share is valuable. And so, yeah, that is the tact that I took whenever the imposter syndrome sort of hit me in the face. I will also say that, like, my readings are very much, you know, I have a website, vaginajenkins.com, and I do what I can to advertise within my limited capacity. But most of my readings are through word of mouth. And what that does for me is instills in me a sort of courage. Someone liked my services so much that they recommended it to someone in their network that they are hopefully in alignment with. And so if I was in alignment with that first person and they recommended me to someone else, chances are I would be in alignment with them as well. So that's another thing that I kept thinking. And then astrologically, looking at my chart, I went back to that second house again, but then I added in the second 8th house axis, you know, both how I earn money and how people share resources with me. And I noticed that both of the rulers for those houses sit in my 9th house. They're actually conjunct each other in my 9th house, which is known as the house of astrology, in that it's like the house that deals with higher forms of knowledge, you know, the difference between like data collection and like data synthesis, and thinking about like larger, wider, more expansive issues like spirituality or astrology. Yeah, law goes there as well. Anyway, that particular placement sort of bolstered me as well. I mean, there are some other aspects of my chart that I think helped me like instill confidence in my ability to be a professional astrologer. But yeah, since 2021, so just for the last couple of years, I have been doing professional astrology readings. And I have learned so much. I continue to learn so much from being in community with people, like on social media here on YouTube, as well as like the folks that I follow on TikTok and Instagram. But I also learned so much from getting to see the patterns myself. And for that reason, I just want to shout out and offer up gratitude for the people that I have read for over the last couple of years. I looked at it the other day and I counted, I want to say it was like 121, 121, something like that. This includes, of course, the people that my friends that I was reading for in like the 2019 and 2020. But yeah, like 121, I think it was the number 121 or 124 readings in the last, what, 3-4 years, and how much I have learned from each one of them, like seeing the patterns unfold in real time and being able to ask people like, oh, what was the timing of your Saturn return? Oh, was it like this? Did it express in this way? Oh, it was a different way. Oh, I wonder if that's because it's connected to your Mars placement, you know, that kind of thing. Just seeing all of the patterns unfold in real time, just amazing. And so, yeah, I feel like that in a nutshell is kind of how I've made my journey from like astrology novice to astrology enthusiast to professional astrologer. And by professional, I mean, I talk about astrology on YouTube and I be giving people readings. So, and honestly, that is my goal. I ultimately want to become a really good electional astrologer. I want to be able to help people with the timing of things, and have clients that I talk to on a regular basis. And I'm like, oh, hey, heads up, it's the first of the month and I want you to know that on the 15th, Mars is going to be crossing your health sector, so watch out for that kidney condition you've been nursing for the last 2 years. You know, I want to have that kind of intimacy with folks and to be able to offer my astrology services in a more in-depth kind of way, in a way that's like more threaded into people's daily lives. So yeah, that's where I've been and where I'm going. And I think that that's everything. I feel like I just talked a whole lot. If you have any questions about my astrology journey, please drop them in the comments below. And I want to know a little bit about y'all's astrology journey too. I mean, some of y'all know a lot. And I'm always curious about like the ways that y'all engage with your charts. It makes me wonder if you're professional astrologers, or if you're thinking about it, or if you want to work together because you're so smart and brilliant. Yeah, I'm curious about y'all's experience as well. Anyway, that's it. That's the video. I'm done talking. As always, thank you so much for watching, and thank you for making time for queer astrology.